Oh, there's no travel, never mind. I thought there was travel, but there isn't. We will have some travel news, I think, at a couple of minutes to midnight. But thanks to Will Schindler. He'll be here every half an hour with the latest headlines for London here on BBC London 94.9. It's Jason Rossum in for Simon Lederman tonight for a special Scottish referendum programme. And you can join in. All you got to do is this.
Call 020 722 42000.
Text 81333. Start your message with the word London.
BBC London 94.9.
And you can join in with the debate. What outcome are you hoping for, and why in the Scottish referendum will you be sad to see them go if they vote yes? If you had the chance to vote today, would you have put a cross in the yes box or the no box? How do you think the campaign's gone? We still want to talk about Andy Murray as well. Is he a traitor to the union? Will you no longer be supporting him at Wimbledon or any other tennis tournament for that matter? He lives in Surrey, so he doesn't get a vote, just like... Actually, Joe, what do you think? Why do you think... Do you think he was running scared and that's why he tweeted at 1:30 in the morning? So the broadcasters... Did he know about this, or was he thinking about that, do you think?
I don't know Andy Murray's mind, but he also announced that no matter the outcome of the vote, he will play for the British Davis Cup team next year. And I have to disagree with who was on earlier, who said that it would reset the clock on you're the Brits winning in Wimbledon. Well, of course, at the time that he won it, he was British,
yes.
So you'd still have
and he
your
proudly
winner.
Had
now,
that flag.
Whether you'd still want him or not as your winner is a different question. But you know, I don't think it makes that. I mean, it's a funny headline. I don't know why he decided to get involved.
I wonder if any people would have changed their minds if he'd have got involved a little bit earlier on, maybe last week, and said that he was supporting yes.
Well, it might have stemmed a bit more of a debate about what Scots outside of London thought.
I mean, how much of a hero is he in Scotland?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say he's a huge deal, but I mean, he obviously people
just Wimbledon win a first British winner in how many years?
You know, we're a bit like that, but obviously, you know, he's very, you know, we're all big fans, and you know, we all support Andy.
I'm going to support him. You, Martin?
In as much as I support
always have
any
supported
sport,
him.
which is pretty
always have
low.
supported him. Although I do like Rafa Nadal, so when they're together, I'd go for Rafa. Anyway, off the subject completely. Earlier on, we've got Martin Hoschick here from Mayor Watch, which is a London government website, looks into London government, a scrutiny website. We've got Joe Musgrave, who's a political consultant and a Scot living in London, and Paul Osborne here as well, our political commentator. And we were talking about the West Lothian question earlier, and Paul, if you could just explain what the West Lothian question is. Are you going to do it, or should Joe do it?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll have a go, and then Joe can correct me. The West Lothian question basically was something that was drafted long before we ever had a Scottish Parliament. The argument is this: if you have a Scottish Parliament and you have a separate class of politicians, members of the Scottish Parliament, who go and vote and make decisions on issues like health and education that affect their Scottish constituents, but at the same time, those constituents have Scottish MPs who come to Westminster and they vote on those same issues in the Westminster Parliament, but the issues they're voting on don't affect their constituents because it's the Scottish MSPs up in Edinburgh who are making those decisions. So why, runs this question, should a Scottish MP get to vote on an issue that doesn't affect his constituents, that only affects people in England or England and Wales or England, Wales and Northern Ireland?
And who do we have to blame for that? Is that by any chance the Labour Party in 1997 when they gave devolution, and they went for devolution and they gave Scotland their own Parliament and Wales their own Assembly? And
the West Lothian question is so named for the Labour MP for West Lothian, Tam Dalyell, who came up with it. It is wrong to say that this was the universal will of every single Labour politician. In 1997, Tony Blair thought, and the rest of the Labour government thought, that a Scottish Parliament, a Welsh Assembly, would deal with the demands in those two countries for a greater level of devolved power. And they gambled that it wouldn't lead to this desire for more power and for eventual independence.
I remember at the time a lot of Tories saying this will break up the United Kingdom. Do you, Joe?
Yeah, it was resisted by Conservatives, which is one of the reasons why the Scottish Tory Party has taken so long to recover in Scotland. It's begun to under Ruth Davidson because she came out quite.
She's been a little bit of a star, hasn't she? Everywhere I see her name on Twitter and all social media, they love her.
Well, she put the Scots Conservatives front and centre as part of a deal for Devo Max, and making that a reality for Scotland, which is completely kind of rewriting the rule book for Conservatives in Scotland who've always wanted to roll back on powers. But what another little interesting perversion of the West Lothian question is that you have this situation where on issues like education and healthcare, Scottish MPs can vote on how it affects England, but they have no vote on how that happens in Scotland because that's handled by MSPs.
But why did we get to that situation?
Well, now
shouldn't it have been sorted back then?
Well, it should have been. But to understand Labour blinked because they have so many MPs, around 40 MPs that come from Scotland, which is Martin was alluding to earlier, is a substantial block of any Labour representation in Westminster, let alone government. And so when quite rightly, not rightly, but they thought that devolution would kill independence. Stone dead was the quote at the time. And they just failed to deal with this question. They thought they wouldn't really come up.
Blair was asked, of course. I mean, Blair was asked, but he used to say, well, we're not going to create a second class or a lower class of MP by stopping Scottish Labour MPs from voting on legislation. I mean, he said that was the job of the House of Commons to pass laws that affected all of the UK. And, personally, I think it's manifestly unfair that Scottish MPs vote on things that their constituents aren't affected by.
Will the same thing, to bring it back to London, sorry, Joe, because we've got Philippa Rowe, who's the council leader of City of Westminster, and she's also London Council's group leader on devolution on the phone at the moment. We'll get to her
I think it should apply
in a second,
everywhere.
Philippa. But if it happens, if the Greater London Assembly members get more power, will we have the same problem with London MPs?
No, I think we shouldn't. Actually, I wrote a piece that didn't go down very well amongst Labour against London MPs a couple of years ago, suggesting that we didn't really need to have 12% of all the UK MPs. We've got a mayor who can speak up for London. We've got 25 Assembly members. There's no reason that ministers can't come to the London Assembly, explain legislation, actually even make it possible for Labour, for the London Assembly members to suggest amendments to legislation and then send it back. And actually, we could do that with all legislation. We could send it around the regions. They could all come back and it could be decided. It didn't go down very well with London MPs that they might want to lose, that we might want to cut the numbers of them.
And Philippa Rowe, let's bring her in here, the leader of Westminster City Council. Good evening. We're nearly into the morning, but good evening, yes. Philippa. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
So you are the London Council's group leader on devolution. Is that something you've thought about, whether there's going to be a new West London question?
Well, not quite in those terms. I think what we're looking for is devolution down, partially perhaps to the GLA, but also further down, actually, to the London boroughs on certain topics. For example, we started to make progress in this area. The central London boroughs, led by Westminster in a grouping called Central London Forward, has won devolution of certain powers and monies linked to getting those very hard to get people into work. Those people who've gone through the work programme but have failed to find work, we're now going to be taking those on to get them into work. So around certain themes, we are looking for the money and the powers to be able to help things that are really pertinent to our local residents, where we as local authorities understand the areas in which we work and therefore can hopefully have greater success.
Wasn't there a couple of months ago, I remember seeing something about boroughs, super boroughs, us having 5 boroughs instead of all the little 32 ones. And also, boroughs are sharing in London now, aren't they? Hammersmith and, well, I don't know now with the Labour Party running Hammersmith and Fulham, and how that's going with Kensington and Chelsea.
And indeed us.
And you, of course, yeah,
yes,
and Westminster.
It's Tri-borough, yes,
the Tri-borough. I mean, you're joining things together, not doing things more locally.
Well, Tri-borough is quite interesting, actually, because what we're doing is we're sharing services, particularly pooling back offices. But that doesn't mean that we can't, as individual authorities, actually have our own way of delivering. It saves us enormous amounts of money in sort of senior management and back office functions, but it does mean that we have got political sovereignty across our individual boroughs, and indeed the way that we actually deliver the service can be quite different, which is why I'm confident that we will be able to continue with Hammersmith and Fulham, even though they've changed the complexion of their borough.
And their logo. Martin.
I just want to chip in. I mean, people talk about devolution to London. Actually, a lot of the funding that comes down, people talk about devolved, is really ring fenced. There's no ability for the council to spend it on a different issue, to say we're not going to spend all of this money, because what happens is the government just takes it back. So if they find a very efficient way of spending this money and producing more returns, but they don't spend 80% of the money that they get, what happens the following year, the government comes and takes it away because they say, well, we gave that money, it was earmarked specifically for employment and skills, and if you didn't spend it all on employment and skills, we'll take it back to Westminster. So it's not really devolution, it's just letting somebody else spend it on your behalf. I mean, if you give me your bank balance this year, you won't consider that you've devolved it to me, just give me some money, let me have what's left at the end.
There's not much.
I think there's sort of two aspects of devolution here. There's one, the sort of the smaller level that we've just been talking about with the Grace deal that we won for Central London Forward, which is a devolution of certain functions that central government were doing that we believe that boroughs could do better, particularly in groupings of boroughs. And that's one level of devolution. It's relatively small. The other level of devolution comes down to actually the larger levels of funding and the tax take for London as a whole. And it does seem rather strange that of all the major cities in the world, London keeps far less, significantly less of the tax takes than any other city in the world.
And you'd give that to the GLA, would you?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, this is exactly where the difficulty in the question comes. Where does it get devolved to?
Why do we need the GLA then? At all?
Well, obviously there are big pan-London strategic issues, particularly around different infrastructure, where it is very useful to have a GLA or a mayor looking at it from that strategic level. But on the other hand, there are also things that need to be done at a local area, because only the size and diversity of London means that it only at a really local level can you understand some of the nuances and difficulties about delivering things, and delivering various services, bits of infrastructure will be different from borough to borough, from central London to outside London or whatever. But I think there is a genuine case for more money being kept in London to fund the massive infrastructure requirements that are required. We've got population growth projections taking us up to about £10 million, and a creaking infrastructure, particularly electricity distribution, transport, surface transport as well as underground transport, all needs a huge amount of investment. Broadband, superfast broadband, all these sorts of issues. And if we're going to remain a preeminent global city and attract the investment and the economic growth that we need to for the whole of the UK, then we need to make that investment. But where is that money going to come from? And it would be better if London could keep some of that tax take themselves.
I think Ruth is exactly right. You can't devolve it all just to City Hall, to the mayor. You asked what we need the Assembly for. Actually, if you're going to give any more money to the mayor, then you need to make sure it's properly scrutinised. For a long time, people were suggesting that the council leaders could do it, but actually, most council leaders now accept that it's a full-time job to scrutinise the mayor. He does spend £20 billion a year, after all. It's a full-time job watching where it's gone. You've got to be able to have experts who can pursue an investigation. Council leaders can't do that in their spare time, in addition to everything else. But you can't give all the money to City Hall. Some of it has to go to the boroughs. The mayor can push through schemes like Crossrail 2. He's got Transport for London who can design pan-London schemes or schemes that cover more than one borough. But below that, there are issues that only councils can deal with, because they require a level of local knowledge which the mayor as a citywide figure can't have.
And Philippa, do you support, or would you like in Westminster, for instance, a mayor like Sir Robin Wales? A directly elected mayor?
I get on very, very well with Robin.
Not necessarily him, but a directly elected mayor.
For Westminster,
yes.
I actually think I like the situation we have at the moment, where we have a leader elected by the council. I would say that as I'm the leader.
Because you're the one, yes. But so why don't you like the system that they have in Tower Hamlets, Lewisham, Newham?
I'm not sure it adds anything other than another complexity to local government. And actually, what we should be striving for is greater simplicity within government, not extra layers of complexity.
What do you think about that, Martin? Because obviously it's completely different to what Sir Robin Wales was saying.
I mean, yeah, you talk about simplifying. You can simplify to a point where you actually do London down. I mean, we did this in 1986 when we abolished the GLC, and there wasn't a pan-London voice speaking for London. If you went down that path again and you push everything back down to the boroughs, then you would find it very difficult to offer a coordinated voice for the capital. But if you simplify things upwards and you cut the number of boroughs, or you pushed everything up to the mayor, then you would lose a lot of the local input, and services wouldn't serve the needs of individual communities, and there would end up being a larger number of dissatisfied Londoners, underserved Londoners. So I think the correct balance is pan-London government and a tier of boroughs below that. The right number of boroughs.
Philippa?
I completely agree with that, and I think it's up to boroughs to either do things as individual boroughs when it's very, very local issues, but we're also very capable, and we've proved it, of actually teaming together, either through something like our tri-borough arrangements, or indeed through larger groupings of boroughs, as we do with the other central London boroughs, and indeed Robin Wales has done through the delivery of the Olympics, where we can all work together on things that are more strategic for broader areas, but not pan-London. So I think the system at the moment works actually quite well.
Before we let you go, Philippa, will you be supporting Andy Murray now at the next year's Wimbledon?
I don't know.
Because I assume you want a no vote in Scotland.
Of course. I know. We're much better together. I mean, England is a very strong, and Wales and Northern Ireland will be very strong economy. Will be very strong without Scotland, but we'll just be so much better with them. So I very much hope for a no vote.
And are Westminster City Council ready for any Scottish parties overnight here in central London? They might all gather in Trafalgar Square.
Well, we're always ready for that because there's so much that goes on in Westminster like that. So we're always ready to clear up and look after people.
What's that?
Is that an invitation?
Yeah. Good. Yeah, let's all go down to Trafalgar Square after the show. Thank you, Philippa. Really nice to chat with you. Philippa Rowe is Westminster Council leader and the London Council's group leader on devolution. Jonathan Davis is still here. He's economist, and I want to talk to Jonathan, you, please, who is Scottish, and our other Scottish person, Joe, here. You were for yes, weren't you, Jonathan?
I was, yes.
And Joe's for no. Just explain to Joe why you wanted yes.
In a nutshell, I believe that if you can bring the government close to the governed, then the governed can more easily control the government. And that way you're more likely, in due course, to get more effective government.
Joe?
Well, my answer, one is a question, which is why does effective home rule, which is what Gordon Brown has set out, not achieve that, but within a structure that allows in so many of the interconnected issues of the day to do with security, to do with actually pooling resources so that we can pay pensions, so that we can continue to fund healthcare, so that we can pool resources where we need to, as the United Kingdom has done for the past 300 years, but allow that sort of system that you're talking about. I don't disagree with you. I think independence is the wrong answer to that, because I think it actually further separates us from the very people that we've been walking beside for the past 300 years. So why don't you think that Home Rule Devo Max offers you that?
Because what is going to happen, apart from anything, the biggest winner of all this is, of course, Alex Salmond, whether or not there's a vote for independence, because basically he's going to get whatever he wants for him and his party, the Scottish National Party, which is, of course, in essence, a socialist party, which means that from what I can envisage, he and his cohort are going to do effectively what Gordon Brown did in the Blair-Brown years, and he's going to put the government massively in hock. He's going to borrow massively. He's going to tax more, and sure, in the relatively short term, like we saw in the late 1990s, the 2000s, there's going to be some economic growth and everyone's going to feel good. But the next generation are the ones who are going to have to pay for it, because eventually he's going to blow up that country and Scotland ultimately are going to be the losers.
And you want a yes vote to put this man in charge of Scotland as an independent nation?
Sure. Let's be serious. In the short term, it doesn't really matter who would be in charge.
I'm just trying to get at why Devo Max or Home Rule doesn't offer you more government, more accountability, which is what exactly it does deliver.
Because you won't have all the powers that you would have as an independent government, as an independent state. Whereas in the longer term, governments who destroy economies, destroy societies, if there's still a democracy going, then the people can get them out and can bring in more reasonable free market politicians.
The Englishman wants to say, Martin.
Yeah, I think one of the problems I have with just Devo Max is that I mean, people talk about a union that's lasted 300 years, but how are we going to be guaranteed that any extra devolution is going to last that period of time? How do we safeguard against a future government coming in, perhaps, ideologically driven against devolution and more of a centrist party, and taking powers back away from people 20 or 30 years? I mean, that's where I'm uncomfortable with this idea that a few promises that seem to have been made up during the last few days of a campaign because the one or two polls showed a result they didn't like, they've been rushed out. How do we know that in a few years' time people are going to regret giving those powers and try and take them back again?
That last point's not quite right. I mean, the Calman Commission was reported last year. Lord Strathclyde's Commission on Devolution reported this year. This has been a long-running debate that Scotland wants more powers for itself. So I don't think it's done on the hoof.
But it's come in the last few days. The Three Leaders Pledge didn't come. If they didn't write that pledge and publish that pledge at the beginning and say, if you vote no, we'll give you more powers, they did it at the end when the polls panicked them. They thought that this was going to be like every election that they used to, where they knew at the outset the way the result was going to go. They know it with Euro elections, they know it with council elections, they know it with Westminster parliamentary elections. They know when they go in whether they're likely to form the next government. They know if they're likely to end up being kicked out of government. They went in the usual arrogant way of Westminster party politics, expecting the result was going to be a resounding no, and they've got something that's going to be a lot closer.
Can I just say, before we go on, and Jonathan, I want to talk to you about the economic outlook of a yes vote and a no vote. But before we do, the Queen is due to make a statement tomorrow morning, regardless of the outcome we hear. So this is coming from the Daily Record, actually, the Westminster editor. Torquil Crichton, is that his name? Is that a great Scottish name? Torquil? Torcuil? What's that, Joe? Do you know that name? Do you know, Jonathan?
I've heard the name.
Do you know him? He's the Westminster editor of the Daily Record newspaper, Torquil Crichton. Wow, what a name. Anyway, he's just tweeted that the Queen is due to make a statement tomorrow morning, regardless of the outcome. That's what we're being told. My goodness. That's going to be interesting, isn't it? Is it going to be live from Balmoral?
Is she on her fifth?
She's there, isn't she?
Is she on her fifth or her sixth double whiskey right now? That's what I'd like to know.
Oh, Jonathan, then, for the economic outlook of Scotland, with let's go for a yes vote if it becomes independent. Well, it won't become independent tomorrow because it'll
be 18 months to 3 years in negotiations. Yeah.
What will happen? Economically?
Well, whether it's yes or no, it's, as I said a few minutes ago, they'll raise taxes. They'll raise borrowing, and yes, for the first few years, they'll have economic growth. I've little doubt about that.
And you still wanted a yes,
but in the long term, that can only create economic havoc for an economy and for society so indebted. With a yes vote, the people would ultimately be able to do something about it. With Devo Max, they're still going to be beholden to Westminster.
And a no vote, if it is a no vote, and we're in the same situation with no Devo
vote,
Max.
They'll get devolution max.
Yes.
They'll get lots of fiscal powers. So again, short-term gains, long-term losses.
Anything you want to say, Joe?
Gosh, and they say the dour Scotsman stereotype come back to fore. I actually don't think a yes vote will be as bleak as that economically. The temptation will be, of course, to spend more to give a short-term boost to the economy. We haven't really touched upon whether an oil fund of any sort would be established and how that could contribute over the medium and long term to Scotland's economy. To me, although I accept the economics of the argument, to me this is much more of a passionate argument about how we should stand by one another rather than the economics. I think one of the great problems with the No campaign was its relentless focus on the economics, which I think disconnected people from the argument.
The economy's stupid,
and I blogged. This is an election where it's not the economy, because people haven't been moved particularly by the currency. Sure, they've been worried about it, but they've wanted to hear a passionate argument for yes or a passionate argument for no, and they've only really heard one from yes
yesterday.
People are used to politicians arguing about economies. We all know that the other side say they're going to bankrupt the country. It's just taken for read. A politician calls another politician a liar. Well, most voters out there think all politicians are liars anyway, so all you're doing is reinforcing the stereotype of all politicians. You tell them you think they're going to destroy the economy and say, well, you would say that you're their opponent. From here in London, it has looked like an awful lot of no. The campaign has been relentlessly negative to a point where you think, why are people going to listen to these? What's the vision that you're selling? And then the vision they sold, this Devo Max, really does seem to, maybe it's just sitting here in in London seems to have been amplified only in the last few days. Most people in Scotland, I would have thought, would have been pretty fed up being told you're not good enough, you're not big enough, you're simply not up to the job of fending for yourselves.
It's an interesting thing. Most folk would say that in elections, general elections particularly, people vote with their back pocket. They wonder, how's this going to affect my finances? But, I think the yes vote came out in the huge numbers that they did, although I suspect that, as I say, the no vote will win. I think the yes vote came out not because of the money, but because there is such a feeling of anti-establishment, because ultimately they know that the establishment, whether it's Liberal Democrat, Labour, Conservative, are basically all in cahoots. It's them, the politicians, against us, the people. And the yes people have come out and voted because they wanted to give the establishment a kicking. If only the establishment would listen, I suspect they will not.
Jonathan Davis, economist and wealth manager. I know you've got to go off now. Are you going to be staying up all night though at home watching the results coming in?
Until I fall asleep. I've got to tell you Matt's cartoon in the Telegraph. Edinburgh Zoo. There's a panda banging on the window saying, "I've just had quads. Isn't anyone interested in me?" It's just brilliant.
Hilarious. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jonathan Davis, economist and wealth manager. We'll say goodbye to you now, but Joe and Martin, you can stay for a bit longer, can't you? Of course you can. Fantastic. And we'll talk more after the news at midnight. Have we got travel, Mel? We haven't got travel at all. Not at all? Not yet, anyway. Oh, they are going to come on. Good. I'll get that set up then. Listen, if you want to join in the debate, please do. We do want to hear from you because we can talk about it now. After the polls closed at 10, that means we can talk about it again. We can talk about Andy Murray if you want to, and whether you'll be supporting him ever again after he went for the yes side, and you are definitely no. Will you be supporting him in tennis? Will you be supporting the Scots whichever way they go and whichever way you felt? What outcome are you hoping for and why? The number to call to chat with us is 020 722 42000. You may not give a damn about Scotland and what happens in Scotland. You may only care about what happens right here in London. And if you do, then you would have heard us debate with Martin here from Mayor Watch. We've got Philippa Rowe we had on earlier from Westminster City Council talking about devolution right here to London government. Would you like to see more power to the boroughs? Would you like to see directly elected mayors in your boroughs like Sir Robin Wales and Lutvar over in Tower Hamlets? Would you like to see that in your borough? Would you like the mayor to get tax-raising powers? Give us a call and let us know what you think about devolution on London government and on the Scottish referendum. The number to call 020 722 42000. You can text 81333, start your message with the word London, and you can email jason.rossum@bbc.co.uk. Right, coming up to midnight here on BBC London 94.9. Let's get the latest travel news.
Starting in Gunnersbury on the A4 clockwise, one lane closed because of a broken down lorry. This is at the interchange with the M4 Chiswick roundabout. Still problems around Tolworth on the A240 in both directions, closed because of an accident at the junction with Allerton Road. In terms of public transport, holding on to the delays on the Metropolitan line, severe delays there between Wembley Park and Aldgate, still very slow as well, with minor delays on the rest of the line, all because of the signal failure at Baker Street. And in